The Trans Am from Smokey and the Bandit is an excellent example of how a car became a star. In this video we're going to show you exactly how it cemented itself into muscle car movie folklore, with some sneaky Hollywood trickery along the way. Then we'll show you how the movie made the car explode, not literally, and find out what happened to the most important Firebird, Burt Reynolds' very own Pontiac. Let's stop messing about and get on with it. If you've not seen Smokey and the Bandit, then clearly your dad never ran out of things to do with you on a rainy Sunday afternoon. It's a 1977 classic, just like the car that threatened to take the starring role away from Reynolds, the Trans Am. The car helped provide the muscle protecting a truckload of dodgy Coors beer from Arkansas to Atlanta. Now, before you start leaving comments saying that all Coors is dodgy, remember, there may be some Americans watching who actually like the stuff. But back to the Pontiac itself, and the fact that it isn't actually the car you think it is on screen. The first thing you should know about the 1977 Trans Am used in Smokey and the Bandit is the fact that a 1977 Trans Am wasn't used in Smokey and the Bandit. Instead, it was its 1976 counterpart. You see, the thing is that the more recent model hadn't been made yet, and considering this isn't a DeLorean we're looking at, the production team didn't have the ability to travel through time. So how did they make it look like a car a year ahead of its release? With a little bit of Hollywood magic / lies. General Motors provided front clips for the 1977 versions to give the illusion that it was the new car. So when the movie was released, everything was nice and up to date, just like my collection of Fabergé eggs that bear a striking resemblance to those that have gone missing, but are definitely not them. This front end hid the big difference between the two cars, which included rectangular quad headlamps instead of only two round lights, a unique slanted and V-shaped nose, as well as a center-mounted hood scoop. The car became an icon because of the movie, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near as popular without the iconic black and gold paint job, with, of course, the gold screaming chicken on the bonnet. As with a lot of movie cars and my school reports, the car was a victim of style over substance. It projected an image of power and performance that the Trans Am simply didn't have. But did anyone care? No. It was the cool car that Burt Reynolds used to outrun the cops in hilarious ways. If you're looking at a spec at this point, then you're a nerd and need to reassess your priorities. With that being said, we should actually take a very quick look at the specs of the car in comparison to the Hollywood numbers it was portraying, as there are some significant differences. Here we see some more crafty studio fibs at play. On the car, you'll see a 6.6-litre sticker poking out of the engine. In fact, this referred to a previous model of the car, which needed to be tweaked for emissions reasons. There's that pesky planet again, complaining about being on fire. Instead, the car in the movie wasn't quite as muscly as the image it was giving off. It was less bench press and more letterpress. The 304 horsepower of the 6.6-litre model was actually an 8-cylinder engine, contributing just 203 horsepower. But that's where camera trickery and alluring moustache come into play. It looked fast on the screen, and featured some of the most fun car chases of all time. And if you're moaning that Hollywood tricked you into thinking something wasn't true actually was, then you might as well moan that that steak you like isn't meat-free. Would you prefer it if Hollywood lied to us to make cool movies, or had moral integrity at the expense of the money shot? Tell us in the comments, please. Speaking of money, what made Smokey and the Bandit so successful was the massive amount of profit it made. Universal Studios originally gave director Hal Needham $5.3 million to play with, but 2 days before filming, they decided to take away $1 million. Presumably, the studios had spent all their extra money on material for flares. This left Needham with the fun task of cutting absolutely everything. Relative to other movies made at the time that featured a car as one of its stars, the budget with which to trash vehicles was very light. They only had 4 cars to work with, and one of those was for promotion. 3 cars for a movie that famously trashes cars is not a lot to play with. That's like telling me I can only have 1 Aston Martin for my birthday. Ridiculous. Ridiculous it may be, but it's also an interesting point. Speaking of which, would you like to find out where Burt Reynolds' very own Trans Am ended up? We'll reveal all later, much like I do when I enjoy my Sunday morning coffee in the garden, despite my elderly neighbour's protests. Sales of the Trans Am went through the proverbial sunroof once the movie hit the screens. Because the film was a slow burner, it was actually 2 years after its release that it had the biggest impact. Almost 69,000 was sold in the year of release, but this jumped to 93,000 the following year, then a peak of just over 117,000 in 1979. Clearly, there were people worldwide who wanted to pretend to be Burt Reynolds for a day and steal a bride away from a groom for a cross-country road trip bodyguarding beer. As far as product placement goes, there aren't many better examples of effectiveness than the collaboration between Pontiac and the movie, possibly Martini and James Bond, or perhaps Indiana Jones and Whips. Now time to find out what happened to that Burt Reynolds Firebird I keep banging on about. Out of the Trans Ams that were used in the movie, there was one that was kept for promotional reasons and didn't receive the punishment of filming. Reynolds was so enamored with the car during shoots that he made a senior executive promise if the movie was a hit that he'd get the car as a thank you. Because obviously his $1 million paycheck, aka a quarter of the movie's budget, wasn't enough. It made $300 million in the end, so a $295 million profit is probably considered a hit, even by my financial standards. He got the car but barely drove it, maybe because he was worried nefarious smugglers would start recruiting him for real. But he should have taken it for a spin more often, as he was forced to sell it in 2014 due to financial difficulties, possibly because he'd spent too much on moustache wax. The new owner restored it back to its former glory with a 2015 makeover. After this, it went on tour, which culminated in a visit to the Reynolds estate, when the superstar got to see the past glory of the vehicle and proceeded to draw all over it in response, with his autograph. Despite the fact he was an actor, he wasn't a monster. The car was then put up for auction in 2022, fetching a huge $497,000 at the Scottsdale auction. The 1977 Pontiac Trans Am then, like the movie, made itself a tidy profit.